So today we are going to start the top of the show talking about something that is extremely familiar to Brian. This is how Gen Z outpaces past generations in the home ownership race. Guess what? Gen Z is making their presence known, but in a new category of culture, becoming homeowners. Right from the top, Brian, we're going to get into this. Wow, man, Gen Z's taking over. What do you got to say about this? Like, we're going to get into some details, but like, hey, take the mic, man. Run with it.
So I wrote down right here on my notes, millennials are pushing to go back home or still living at home, while Gen Z is like, yo, I'm out. I want out of here. Like, I don't want this. I'm not trying to live with my parents. I'm trying to do my own life. Whereas millennials are a little bit more inclined to like, hey, like I could live at home or I could offset certain things, and they'll look at it more of an opportunity to save money rather than, the Gen Z like, I'd rather just, go full force, figure it out, and get the heck out.
Okay, so now I am like, I'm putting you on the pedestal right now to like start talking about this. You're literally at the cusp of these two different generations. So I know you're like at the very last tail end, maybe even the last week of what the millennial window is. I know it's not that, I'm exaggerating. The reason I'm talking about Gen Z though is like you have these clients, you have these friends, and they're at the beginning edge of this because there's still a lot of Gen Zs that are younger that aren't even going to qualify yet. But I mean, what does this mean to you when you read this? I think it's indicative of the cultural shift we've seen and the attitude about homeownership that is different from the millennial and the Gen Z, and even Gen X. But also, like, I think this forecasts where we're going. I think there's going to be a lot more of this coming, again, taking into consideration all of the affordability issues and rates and high home prices. But there's clearly an appetite for this with Gen Z.
So I want to say when I first started in the industry, I was 22, 23. And at that moment, I don't believe I saw a lot of people in my age group at that time looking to buy houses. It was more still trying to figure out what they were going to do with their life, career, school, or, still just trying to figure it out. But the difference is that this year, in most, I've had clients range anywhere between 21 as low as 18 at some times, all the way up to like 24. And these are people that range between, two boyfriend and girlfriend, military young couple. And the military young couple was actually a pretty surprising one because when I started talking to them, they were still living on base. They were barely going to start getting their BAH, although they weren't able to get approved for something here in San Diego. That mindset and that want was already, hey, I don't want to stay in military housing. I'm not trying to, just go quote unquote do the rental life here. They wanted to actually purchase. And for them, it was more about creating a clear path and understanding like, hey, once you rank up, if you're doing this, you're going to by default be able to purchase a little bit more because of, your incentives.
Okay. So, part of our conversation, when we talk about the generations, we start seeing these patterns, right? Where you see some millennials go, I don't want to have the same experience my parents had when they lost their house in the financial collapse, the global financial collapse of 2008, 9, 10. So you see a lot of that attitude like kind of ingrained. But then I'm noticing that there's a different attitude in Gen Z where they're like, after it, dude. They're like, hey, whatever I got to do to go and get this thing, I'm going to just get after it. Whether it's having multiple borrowers or having friends participate in the purchase of the home, or house hacking like we've been talking about. And so now I feel like they're kind of going, let's say, against the current of the generation right before them, which is not as averse necessarily to what happened in the Great Financial Collapse because they were younger, didn't know about it, or maybe they frankly don't care. I mean, do you think there's a level of internal competitiveness that's just like, hey, whatever, I'm a competitor, I'm going to go get it?
Yeah, I honestly, I agree with that. And when you said experience, I think that's a really key word to describe this because I felt through that experience in 2008, 2007 when we lost our house. And, one of the reasons why I got more into real estate was because I wanted to understand more how actual housing, loans, and everything worked. But I do feel that, it's more of a experience like, hey, I don't want to go through that pain, or hey, I don't want to go through that stress. Hey, I saw my parents, that really, forecast the way that you're going to think once, you're making those decisions. And it's showing up in a lot of, our generation. I mean, you could see here by the numbers, whereas the Gen Zs, I feel they weren't even, how do I say it? Aware enough to be able to say, hey, this is what they experienced. It's more like they were either barely being born or it had already passed by the time that they were born and, kind of doing their life.
Because it's kind of like it's,
for the most part.
But what you're kind of tiptoeing around, like it's not historically relevant anymore. No. To a certain point. Like it now exists. It exists like in books and in stories you hear on the internet and like YouTube shorts.
I think the closest catastrophe that we could go back to that's the most relevant is COVID 2020. So before you go through any other real estate meltdown or crazy times, we're going to go to 2020. And I think that's where a lot of Gen Zs are drawing a lot of their, their wants, their experience, their opportunities because of everything that kind of unraveled from there. Whereas millennials, I felt like just leading up into that was when we were ready to start buying, but then everything kind of fell through. And, some people got, I think, the shorter end of the stick.
I think there's a little bit of embitterment that happened because of that. Because I know, I've talked to people too that are a couple years ahead of you, and they're like, "Hey, I was in high school. I remember us losing our house, or what." I'm not going to say the situation, but there's a lot of that, and so I think they're a little bit more embittered and maybe hesitant because hey, I don't get burned again, or I don't want that. Like I saw what my parents went through. I saw what I went through as a teenager at that time. I don't want none of that noise. But this generation, though, you have to think that the GFC was 16 years ago. Okay, so someone who is, let's say, 19 now, they were 3.
Exactly.
And someone who's 24 now, they were what, 8?
Yeah.
Okay, so what grade are you in when you're 8 years old? Like second grade, maybe? Maybe second or third, I don't know, whatever grade you're in. Let's say you're in early elementary school.
Yeah, elementary.
But compared early elementary school to being in high school and having awareness of your home situation economically, there's a huge difference in that.
And I think in that time period of your life, you're a lot more sensitive and more reactive to certain ththings that's happening around your life because I feel like, it's all about me. And you kind of grow with that. So I feel that also starts showing in your later years of life where I'm like, hey, I don't want to make that decision because based on past experience, I already know how that leads down the line. Whereas Gen Zs are just like full send, like let's figure this out, let's see what happens, and if it doesn't happen the way that I want it to happen, well, at least we still tried. And I actually will quote from the article. There was a Gen Z girl, Dominic Vericchia, that purchased, and he was very optimistic. He said, I don't know if I was making the right call buying a home. I didn't know if I was going to turn me upside down. And I feel that is a huge feeling for everybody, but the difference is that I'm still going to go through with it regardless.
Okay, go back though. So you're quoting this guy Dominic, right? But so here's what I want everyone who's watching this to know. Dominic, it said 24-year-old homeowner Dominic. So he's 24 today.
Yes.
He purchased in October of 2020. There was a massive amount of uncertainty, and this dude's like, "Oh, house on fire," and he like runs in it, right? Now he got a loan. It says here 2.83%.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on now.
Who wouldn't die for a 2.83% right now? And here he either had maybe he didn't have the foresight necessarily. Maybe he was like, "Hey, I don't know any better, but I'm gonna go buy a house anyways." Maybe he did have the foresight. Who knows? Maybe this kid's a financial planner. We just don't know it.
But you know what?
Like 20. My point is, he was 20 when he did this. So clearly, there's people that are in this age bracket that are like, you know what? I'm getting after this. That competitive part. That's why I brought this up earlier. Is I think this is a demonstration of that and it's going to be more indicative as a common denominator for them because again, quoting the article, 27.8% of 24-year-old Gen Zers are homeowners. That's a lot. That's more than millennials and more than Gen X.
And what I think is crazy also is that if you want to buy, you're gonna buy regardless. But at the same time, I feel that when you're younger, you have a lot more opportunity to take risks without having as big a repercussion.
You can hit the ground and bounce a little bit still.
Yes, exactly. So even if, let's say, it would have gone the other way around, the investment or the property, he wasn't able to keep, he's still within a young age where he could literally just wash, rinse, repeat, and start all over again without having a huge impact on his life, financial life, and family. Whereas someone that's near 30s or a little bit older, has a family, has a stable job, has real rooted responsibilities, it's more of a gamble, or more of a unsure decision whether you want to make a move and buy right now. Whereas you have to make more of a calculated move. Whereas someone younger that has no responsibilities, you could right off the bat say, hey, let's shoot, and then I'll aim and figure it out as you go. If you're not in that position, everything else needs to be more calculated, more planned out, and you can't really just say, "Hey, I'm gonna throw," just shoot and say, "Hopefully, I hit the target." And
that just call a spade a spade. The reason we're sitting here talking about this, and they use this story with this kid Dominic, is because this happened, but we're looking at it from the rearview mirror.
Yes.
We're citing that he bought this in October 2020. Okay, that's 4 years ago at this point. We're citing that he has a 2.83% mortgage. Well, that's 3 times lower than the rates were just October ago, and so. Like, we have to be real. That is true for him back then when he was 20 that this worked. It doesn't work for some people now. But that doesn't mean that their appetite's gone away. Mm-mm. So kind of in rounding out this thought, the housing market still is what it is with elevated prices. He's even saying here, by the way, I didn't know if I was making the right call. He's even admitting I didn't even know, and I didn't know if it was going to turn me upside down. But what's happened to the property value since October 2020? like they're on average up like 30 to 40% depending on the part of the country you're in.
Even if you didn't keep it anymore, he's up. Yeah, exactly.
He could have bought this house for $200,000 and he's still at like what 300, maybe 350 or something like that. So again, he did that. I think it's just a great example. But rounding out the idea to close up this section is, what would you tell people who maybe they are the Dominic but they missed the window? Now what do they do?
Yeah, that was a really good question because that's what I was gonna ask next. But I honestly feel
how about answer it?
Yeah.
Now that I asked it.
Well, that's a really good question. And before I get to that answer, I'm just going to give you a great question, by the way, but I will get to it.
Answering questions with questions. So what do they do? What do people do?
I honestly, from what I've seen and experiences that I've, gone through or heard, I think it's, diversifying yourself in a way that you're either going to come in with more money, have a co-borrower, or just get creative with the fact of how you're going to purchase a house. If that's still in your goals and everything checks out, like, hey, if I'm able to split it with a co-borrower with my partner or with a bunch of buddies, then if you're able to come up with a plan that works for you, then I think you should still go forward with it. But if you're doing it on your own, it's very expensive. You're at the edge of your debt to income ratio and you're kind of like putting everything on there, then it's going to be a tough cookie to swallow. So I feel that you should probably ease off. But if you have the right support, you do have the finances in line, and you could withstand maybe 6 months to a year of an elevated payment, then I think you should definitely take that option and look what it looks like for you.
So in summary, take a look if you're curious.
Yeah.
If you're curious and you qualify, then take action, but also be measured in your choices.
And there's
Is that a good summary?
No, 100%.
Okay.
And there's something that I'll dive into in a little bit later on the article is that I think being prepared right now is going to really put you in a situation that when everything starts dropping, a lot more people are going to come in, but you're going to have the feasibility of being able to move quickly rather than someone that, hey, rates drop, I'm just getting approved, I want to go shop. People that already had been approved, they're already basically dropping offers on the property that you were looking at. So.
We can't sit here and pretend like there's this negative outcome for being prepared. There just isn't.
And it is. It's like it's not going to hurt you at all to be prepared. Like the worst thing that could happen is you're in the best position to be able to make the best offer so that you can get your offer accepted.
If I'm really going to be picky, here's what you can't get back: your time in preparing.
Oh no!
If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But that's the consequence. Is it didn't work? Okay, well, if it happens to work, then you're going to end up being homeowner in the end.
Yeah, and I have an example of that exact thing that we're doing right now with one of our clients, where we're getting ready, we're getting prepared. We're not going to pull the trigger yet, but we're going to put ourselves in a position that, once the time is right and we're at the right level or the tier where they want to make the move, we're going to easily be able to get it done in a feasible amount of time, not, take our time and then, lose 2 weeks before we can actually start making this happen.
Solid, man. Yeah. Solid.